Hi there, I'm Danny Flex and welcome to the latest edition of Seconds Out Live. I've got a bit of a cough, or more than a bit, it's fair to say, so I apologise right now if it's unclear at all, but I will do my best. And obviously, I've got my wingman here to help me out, Mr. Ayman Khan. Ayman, how's it going?
It's going very well, Danny. I feel like, what? I didn't want to admit this live. We missed. I go on Seconds Out Live and look, Josh Hart is great. Josh Green is great. But I was driving back home one of the weekends. It was the Batavia Bibble Seconds Out Live that you did. And I listened to it and I was like, damn, I actually miss kind of being on there and being live and having the back and forth interaction with yourself. So, Danny, it's great to have this combination back. We're like a Cadbury's Echo, It's just the right combination, right mix of things. I wish they bring it back, but great to see you. And of course, it's not just me and you, Danny. People in the chat as well too. Thanks for joining in. Can't wait to delve into take a bite out of this week's episode of Seconds Out Live.
We need to start filming the chat, the banter before we start the show. We're talking all about old age chocolate bars. Vinny, the videographer has no idea what we're talking about. He's too youthful. But yeah, so we are going to talk about loads of stuff today. There's a lot going on in the boxing world. Long before Ayman heads out to Birmingham, but it's not much of a trek for Ayman. It's a busman's holiday, if anything, for Liam Davis and Shabazz Massoud. But we've got plenty more to talk about. But you mentioned the chat there, Ayman. I told you you were getting slandered on the chat before we began by Stephen. Stephen, boldly not revealing his surname, said you want to be the new Charlie Parsons. What do you make of this?
Oh, you know what? I remember back. What is it? It's the wrestling thing where it's like, people come into wrestling and they say they want to be this version of this version of that. Nah, I don't want to be this version of it. I want to be the one and only Ayman Khan is just enough good for me. So I'm happy to be just me. But Steven's always a little bit antsy in the comments. We don't mind a little bit of that as well too, Steven. But settle in for a good episode, Steven. I hope you've got a couple more zingers in your back pocket as well too. You need them.
Well, he says here you're trying to take over the boxing YouTube scene. We wish him well. I'm not sure who we is, the whole Stephen family. Maybe his name's Stephen, I don't know. But we wish him well too. I mean, if Ayman takes over the YouTube scene, presuming he stays with Seconds Out, and why wouldn't he? Then we're the number one channel, aren't we? So everyone's happy. Cussy System says, as for Daniel Dubois, I would like to see him against Joseph Parker. However, Parker is not in the IBF rankings. So maybe Effie Jagbar, Fabio Wardley, or Jared Anderson. Lewis Hart is calling for Anthony Joshua to fight Danny Gilfillan next, although he's misspelt Gilfillan's name, which is a bit disappointing. Eddie Hill says Usyk showed AJ what a real Olympic champion looks like. Has another Olympic champion been outclassed so much by another in recent history? Yes, Eddie Hills. I would say that Alexander Povetkin was outclassed by Vladimir Klitschko in a battle of Olympic champions not that long ago. Maybe not quite the same degree, as in he didn't stop him early, but he was clearly dominated in that fight. Lewis Hart, another misspelling. Danny Gilfillan got stopped in sparring by Martin Okolie. I mean, everyone's been stopped in sparring by Martin Okolie, in fairness. And Rod Brown says Martin kicks their asses. We are going to talk about Daniel Dubois' next opponent, and I'll give some context in a minute. But we want to get the poll out nice and early, so please do vote. We're asking who should be Daniel Dubois' next opponent. And we're pretty sure it's not going to be AJ at this point, so he's not on there. So the idea is, if not AJ, then who? Should it be Zhang, who's on a decent run of form, having beaten Deontay Wilder last time out? Should it be Joseph Parker, who many in the chat are already calling for, and defeated Zhang, of course, and has been waiting for his world title shot for quite some time? Or should it be the winner of the ordered eliminator between Ajit Kabayel and Martin Okolie, who's been mentioned several times in the chat already? Or other? If it is other, please do tell us in the comments who you'd like to see. I asked my son earlier, because he was asking what we were going to talk about on the live. He's only 8 years old. And he did eventually say, did he say Kabayel? No, he said one of the ones on our list eventually. But before that, he went through so many other fighters in different weight divisions. It was Willie Hutchinson, Ishmael Davis, just basically any fighter he'd ever heard of. But I didn't want to see any of those fights. So he's not coming on the pod anytime soon. DB Coupon says, state your old age chocolate bars. I love the old Yorkies, not for girls. We're talking about the Echo, as Ayman mentioned. Cadbury's Secret. I think it's Cadbury's. Could be Nestle. What was the other one you said, Ayman?
Dream.
That was it. Yeah, so, yeah, we were putting pictures in the chat and everything. It was going off. But, yeah, Vinny stayed out of the fray. He hadn't heard of any of them, unfortunately. Eddie Hills says, can you imagine Dubois' non-existent head movement versus Zhang's rapier left hand? Mr. Luca says, no, he needs to be kept active, Lewis, and no, it should be Parker. He beat Zhang and Wilder. Zhang deserves a big fight, says Ezio. Has to be Parker, says John L. I hope you're all voting in the poll, as well as putting that in the chat. Please not Parker. He's a boring fighter, but probably deserves it, says Martin Mulligan. Oh, fair enough. Rod Brown says, has Caballero signed for Okolie yet? Not as far as I'm aware, but we shall see. Nat says, Fuse Bar. That is another one. Yeah, Fuse Bar. Any love for the Fuse Bar, Ayman?
Fuse is chocolate with... It's not chocolate. No, I'm getting confused with Picnic. I can't remember Fuse. You have to remind me.
I always get confused between Picnic and Topic.
They're basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, they must be. You never see them in the same place twice.
No.
Lewis Hart says Dubois versus Zhang has about 6 rounds in it. See, Lewis has wisely stopped trying to talk about Danny Gilfillan now as he's realised he cannot spell it. Nico Van Dam says not a flake. Yeah, we're no flakes on this podcast. Lewis Hart says, haha, I've had 2 this year, Zante and Marbella. That's all he's responding to that. Stephen, I would do anything to be in that Seconds Out WhatsApp group. I mean, maybe stop slagging off Ayman Khan and be your first step, Stephen, but, you know, it's a 12-step process. Eddie Hills, Parker is still Stinkinator, we shouldn't forget. Ramoni Mode XD says, hey, guys. Hi, guys, in my Chris Jericho voice. But, yeah, so basically, we saw earlier this week Eddie Hearn saying that Dubois obviously wants to fight, make his second defense of that IBF heavyweight title in February. He said that due to some niggles, some injuries that Anthony Joshua has, he's probably not going to be ready in time for then. He's looking at Joshua coming back around May time. And Frank Warren had already said that if Joshua, the rematch is there if Joshua wants it, but if not, he does want Dubois to be out in February against the contender and make a defense. So that's why we're asking, if not AJ, then who? And Ayman, you spoke to Eddie over the last week. I've spoke to Frank. It always tends to kind of fall that way for some reason. What do you make of this issue with AJ, first of all, and him not being ready for February? Is that completely legit, or is that Eddie Hearn doing a good job as a promoter and kind of giving his man a bit of extra time and giving him a reason not to take an immediate rematch?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. Essentially, I think the words kind of that have been used have been a medical issue, maybe surrounding a injury of sorts behind the scenes. From what I've seen, actually, from Anthony Joshua on his social medias, his Snapchat specifically, he seems to be enjoying his time away from the sport. I think he was on a bit of a night out, and I think he was joined by John Conte and Michael Watson as well too. So enjoying the time away from the boxing ring with some of the greats in the sport, but not really too concerned about in-ring action right now, a Dubois rematch or anything else for Anthony Joshua. But with Eddie, yeah, I mean, with the signals that come out when Eddie starts talking away from a potential rematch and not hyping it up, it kind of gives you an idea of the path that's going to be forged ahead with in terms of the former unified heavyweight champion. It looks likely now that I think that AJ will be looking to sit on the sidelines until whatever happens between Fury and Usyk, or Usyk and Fury takes place in towards Christmas time. So I think that's what it's going to be for AJ. No Dubois rematch, probably the right decision, to be fair, considering the way the first one went out. I did see some kind of rumblings of a couple of people in the industry saying that they've had some conversations with people surrounding AJ's team, and they're very confident in the rematch, and AJ's confident in the rematch, and that they don't rate Dubois still all that highly. I think that's a mistake and a misstep, and how can you not after what happened at Wembley? So yeah, look, I think Eddie's kind of put the small kind of signals out away from Dubois, and we're moving towards a fighter who's going to wait for that opportunity, wait for that big fight to materialize for Tyson Fury, and he'll either hold 3 belts or he'll hold none of them, but it'll still hold a lot of value. Not the value that it did beforehand, maybe a couple of years ago, but enough to get the casual fans and still quite a large segment of the hardcore boxing fans who've waited many years for that fight. So, yeah, I think that's very likely right now.
Nat says, Flexen, we had the conversation about Picnic and Topic. You know the difference. On a completely unrelated note to that, I've got to say my lady partner gave me this cough. It was our 6-month anniversary last week, and I didn't get her anything. And she gave me this. So happy days. Ezio says Okolie should fight Ruiz Jr. Ainsley Shan says AJ changed his mind. Lol. DB Cooper 1 is advising Lewis Hart to get himself out to Riyadh and hit up a Dubai? I'm not sure where that came from. A Dubai beach bar. That time of the year, some serious talent out there. Not going to lie, loads of Irish birds. Thanks for that, DB Cooper 1. Toxic masculinity still a thing. Mr. Luca probably won't do it because he has PTSD. I don't know if he's talking about Lewis Hart there or AJ. Danny Gilfillan joined us. Thanks, Danny. Nice to see you. At least you can spell your own name correctly. Says Lewis Hart got El Sparko by HS Tiki Toki in Marbella. Ainsley Shand, all about dates. Okay, again, not sure whether you're talking about me or AJ. Lewis Hart, yeah, I don't mind an Irish bird, to be fair, mate. They're up my street. God, Lewis Hart, you representing Boxing Social in this chat? I should ask, because, you know, they might not be too happy about that. Rod Brown says Dubois will fight anyone, I think, and hope. DB, a lot of messages retracted here. DB Coop 1 says, tells Lewis Hart, stay away from Katie Taylor, son. She's the priest's daughter. Just on that note, I've interviewed Katie Taylor's dad, and Katie Taylor's mum all separately. What does that mean? That's like a hat trick that no one else has ever had. It's like left foot, right foot header, isn't it? Surely I should get something for that, like one of her belts or something. Just so to think about, Katie, if you're watching. Lewis Hart says, don't worry, mate, not my type. So, Katie Taylor, you can rest easy. You're not Lewis Hart's type. I'm sure she's devastated. Cuss's system. If AJ does not take the rematch and has doubts, he should retire. He does not deserve a fight with Fury if Fury wins against Usyk and has all the belts. Yeah, but Cuss, as you all know, as a long-time fan of boxing, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And AJ is still a huge draw. Jump Tube says, AJ, in brackets Hearn, wants to wait and see if Fury can pull it off against Usyk and then make a UK fight with Fury. Nico Van Dam says, Triple D is a lion bar, king of the jungle, Kingslayer. Isn't Seth Rollins Kingslayer? And obviously Jamie Lannister. Lewis Hart says, Danny F, thoughts on the old Yorkie rapper? Yeah, was a big fan. Any kind of fancy rappers, not fancy rappers like Nelly or someone, you know, fancy rappers of chocolate, I'm quite happy with. Magic 71 says, Joshua should never have been offered a rematch, a losing challenger. I didn't think you were allowed a rematch after a loss. I think different governing and sanctioning bodies have different rules on that. Eddie Hill says, if AJ waits for Usyk versus Fury, Dubois should fight the winner. Mr. Luca, now they all know AJ will get sparked out again. Stephen says, would AJ deserve, a fight or a shot at 3 belts when Fury beats Usyk? AJ isn't mandatory for any belt. I mean, he's not going to be mandatory coming off a defeat, is he? John L, AJ doesn't deserve a rematch at all and certainly didn't deserve another shot at Usyk. Fury beats Usyk. I think that means if Fury beats Usyk, there will be a trilogy. AJ needs to get back in line. DB Cooper 1, Daniel Dubois needs to stay away from that Brazilian bunda. Reminds me of Arturo Gatti situation. Ex-boxer killed in Brazil by his wife who got away with it. Women could derail his career. I mean, that's a bit of a leap, DB Cooper 1, from Daniel Dubois having, you know, a loving relationship with his partner to suddenly be worrying about getting murdered in Brazil. Wow. I hope Stan Dubois is not watching this. He's already started to air me, so, you know, this will make it worse. Steven says, imagine Lewis Hart trying to talk to a girl. Ha, ha, ha. Good grief, man. Poor girls. DB Cooper 1, I like how Danny Flexen had to clarify my lady partner. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. I wasn't really sure what to say, but I watch a wrestling podcast on Wrestle Talk. It's actually the Wrestle Talk podcast. And Ollie Davis is one of the main hosts on there, says lady partner. So I've just kind of nicked it off him. Probably not the only thing, to be fair, if anyone watches both podcasts. Fizz says Dubois shouldn't go for Parker. Parker will outbox him. Nat's just confirming she is a lady to DB Cooper 1. I mean, Eamon's met my partner, so he can also confirm, hopefully. Jump Tube says, will Okolie go through with an IBF ordered fight with Ajit or go to the WBA regular and fight Manuel Char or Mahmoud Char, depending on what we're saying this week. Bud Top says, didn't the IBF not allow Josh Warrington to fight for the title recently because he's coming off a loss? What's the difference with AJ other than a big old bribe? God, is that a new nickname for AJ? Big old bribe. I quite like it. I don't know if that's the IBF rule or not. I'd have to look into it. But they said the rematch was there. Maybe Dubois would have had to give up the belt. I don't know. But they were pretty clear that the rematch was there if both men wanted it. So, yeah, getting back to the subject, I completely understand why AJ or his team wouldn't advise him to go straight back in with Daniel Dubois. Frank Warren, when I interviewed him last week, said he thinks that Dubois simply got AJ's number and that AJ will never be able to beat him. So probably not the best idea, perhaps, to go to an immediate rematch, although that would benefit both Dubois and Warren financially to a large extent. So I understand why, but then it's hard to think of who you could put in with Dubois as his second defense that's going to, A, be commercially attractive and B, give him a certain level of test. because Dubois has had those 3 fights in a row. He can't, in really good opposition. Maybe Miller, slightly good opposition. Then, Hrgovic and AJ, really good competition. You don't want to then drop him down a big level from there. So, Ayman, we've obviously put it out in the poll, so please do vote. But who would you like to see Dubois go in against in February?
I think the last year, 18 months, whatever it is, 2 years of Dubois' career, let me just fix my camera for you there, have been really good and a real kind of indicator as to how he's been matched well and learnt from kind of his experiences in the ring. The likes of Usyk, then into Jarrell Miller, into Hrgovic. He's fought and beaten fighters who are live and faced the very top of the tree as well too in Usyk. And I think you've got to go that way. You've got to go the way of fighters who've got something in the ring. They've got something to offer. They're either undefeated or they're scalps that are still credible within way that you've gone with Dubois so far. That match, well, that level of high competition is something that's been claimed as a factor towards his victory over Joshua. When you look at who they've faced in the recent period that I've been talking about, so you keep going that path. And when you talk about going that path, then there's only a couple of fighters that really materialize as a credible opponent. You got to kind of scratch off Campbell and Okolie right now. It seems like they're going towards a path of being mandated to fight each other to then be the mandatory for Daniel. So it seems like they'll be out of the mix. Then that kind of only really leaves like Zhang and Joe Parker. I think both of them would be real good options for the opponent for Daniel Dubois. Joe Parker, recent run of form has been really, really good, as has Zhang's as well too. Fought slightly, of course, with the loss to Joe, but a resounding knockout victory over Deontay Wilder. And both would be credible threats, I think, to Daniel Dubois, who's got that run of momentum and form. Looking at the IBF rankings right now, Joe Parker doesn't feature there, so you'd have to scratch Joe Parker off the list. So it seems like Zhilei Zhang would be the front runner for it, but Zhilei Zhang is the one who'd be looking to enact a rematch clause if he wanted to over Joe Parker. So would he want to avenge the defeat to Joe Parker, or then go straight for, or instead put that to the side and go straight for Daniel Dubois? I'd be inclined to think they'd want to go for that IBF title shot. But it's also for Daniel Dubois' team to then choose Zhilei Zhang to be your voluntary challenger. In the history of boxing, voluntary challengers or voluntary fights are generally a lot more softer than the likes of Zhilei Zhang. And I wonder if they maybe look a little bit further down the rankings for an opponent. But with Riyadh season, that introduction, it maybe wouldn't even be a factor as to whose choice it would be. And it would be the given choice of Zhilei Zhang, I guess, because as it being those type of the fights are the ones that are wanted over in Riyadh. And if you want to feature them, you're matched pretty hard as Dubois has been in the past. So for me, either Zhang or Parker, but I imagine it'll actually be Zhilei Zhang.
And Stephen says, class, our Flexen has countless different voices for every comment. Just like that. Definitely could be a WWE manager for a jobber. Why only a jobber? I hope you mean because the jobber needs a mouthpiece, not because that's all I'm qualified for.
Which jobber would you want to manage?
I mean, they don't have jobbers as much anymore, do they? Like they used to. But in the old days, maybe Barry Horowitz or the Brooklyn Brawler. Actually, no, the Red Rooster. When Terry Taylor was under the hood as the Red Rooster, I'd have a bit of that. I think Bobby Heenan managed him, actually, when he went heel.
I think anyway, I've got the slick back hair like a James Ellsworth. What do you think?
Oh, yes. Yeah, but you need to lose a bit of weight to get into Ellsworth's category. That man is gaunt. DB Cooper 1 says, to Nat, good evening, milady. Thoughts and prayers for having to put up with that thing. Hi. Danny Gilfillan says the IBF wasn't on the line in the Warrington-Kakachi fight. Yeah, I think that was the point that Jumptude was making. Thunder Road says 6 months with a lady partner and he didn't give her a gift. She gets the gift of my company, Thunder Road. Does the STI not count? Where do you think I got this cough? Regardless, hit the thumbs up chat. Thanks, Thunder Road. IQ Boxing Academy, I hope that's Xavier Miller, our good friend, says Dubois versus Waldley, which is an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, Waldley obviously coming off the best win of his career. Absolutely explosive performance and win against Fraser Clark. It would be a big step up in terms of levels, going from, British title to world title. But as a kind of voluntary defense, if it's in England as well rather than in Riyadh, that would be, eminently sellable. What do you think about that, Ayman? Dubois against Fabio Wardley?
I'm not against that matchup at all, but I really think Fabio Wardley's really kind of smashed through any sort of ceilings because of, look, he's definitely shaked off the tag of the white collar background, that's for sure. But the context of it was still there and relevant in the fight with Fraser Clark because of Fraser Clark's background. But he's now beaten and come through that test at British level, and he looks towards the world titles level. But I think if he's managed properly, you go through the levels still and continue through those levels. No need to jump straight into Daniel Dubois. I would get it and understand it, because if that opportunity is presented to you, maybe you do take it. But maybe go the European route, fringe world title level, and then go on from there. There's still a couple of tests I want to see from Fabio to pass, and I don't think he's really been in with a puncher as of yet either. So I think there's still some more improvements and maturation in Wardley's game, who's shown so much so far. But I think he's real with the heavyweight division. You really never know who's going to be the one until they get there. And Wardley's been showing it out of the crop. You might not have fancied him, but there's more to come from that. And I think if you throw him in straight away, you might lose that. So I wouldn't be against it, but I wouldn't want to see it next.
So just to answer Thunder Road and Cuss's system, Dennis, nice to see you. I haven't interviewed Dave Dubois last week as planned. I did message him earlier in the week to say, do you still want to do this? He has not responded. I can hopefully say as yet, but either way. So yeah, I'll keep you all informed. But yeah, I will ask him the questions you're putting in the chat if I do get to speak to him. Rod Brown says, I think Billy Nelson is waiting for Caballel. Well, surely Caballel should fight Okolie, not Billy Nelson. DB Cooper 1 says, I don't like how AJ's camp still looks down on Dubois. Dave Allen was saying AJ's mate told him they still think Dubois is shit and will rematch him. I don't like this whole Dave Allen says, AJ's mate says. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit tenuous, isn't it? Mr. Lucas says Dubois would get to Parker, I think, late. Eddie Hill says Dubois only commercial attractive fights are against the big names. Exactly. He's not a draw enough for the likes of Caballel, Zhang, Okolie being big money fights. DB Cooper 1 says, I think Dubois should take his time, enjoy being world champ, let the heavyweight division play out. Riyadh season is full of upsets. He could easily lose next to Parker / Caballel. A rare, sensible comment from DB Cooper 1. It must be a special day. Bud Top says, Frank Warren kept saying Moses Itama wants to be the youngest heavyweight champ. He has a top 10 ranking already. After the December card will be higher. Will be Dubois Itama if Frank Warren has his own way. I don't know. Would Frank Warren want that? Would he want his two, youngest, best heavyweights fighting each other at this stage, taking Fury obviously out of the equation because he's a bit older? I'm not sure that would be the best for Queensbury because, Itama wins. That's great for Warren in terms of getting the record-breaking young heavyweight champ for however many more years. But then you've got Dubois, who's still in his 20s, suffering a, upset loss. So, no, I think Warren would like to keep them apart, but both at a high level if possible. I think the best for Warren, as hard as it is to say, would be if Usyk wins the Fury rematch, which we'll be talking about in a minute. And then he guides Itama towards those belts instead. But we shall see. Eddie Hill says, Wardley just about deserved the European title shot. Beating Big Phrase doesn't make you world level. Oh, it's Big Phrase, sorry. Nico Van Dam says, I think down the line, Triple D versus Fury after December 21st. Well, a lot of people are mentioning Fury, so it seems like an optimal time to move on to headline number 2. Vinny, if you can hear me. There was the press conference, of course, last week for Oleksandr Usyk's rematch with Tyson Fury on December 21st in Riyadh. Fury was apparently flying straight out to training camp in sunny climes, according to Frank Warren, straight after the press conference. A number of things came up at the press conference, one of which was the tragedy suffered by Tyson Fury and his wife, Paris, in the loss of her child or the pregnancy that she had 2 days before the first Usyk fight, apparently, which, although Tyson insisted he wasn't using it as an excuse, must have weighed heavily on the Gypsy King's mind going into that contest. And we extend our condolences, of course, to Tyson and Paris. But not only that, we also heard from Tyson. He made a big thing of the fact that he's the king, the Gypsy King of rematches. Every rematch he's had, he stopped his opponent in the second fight. And that is true. You can look at the record. And Frank Warren believes that will play into matters on December 21st. Just to recap, John McDermott, highly controversial points win first time out, stopped him, I believe, in a sweltering, was it York Hall in the rematch? Or Brentwood Centre? One of the fights was in Brentwood Centre, one was in York Hall, but I can't remember which one was the rematch. Deontay Wilder obviously drew the first fight, came out with a completely new approach, forward-thinking approach in the second one, and destroyed Wilder. Derek Chisora, relatively competitive British title fight. I believe it was on Channel 5, first time out that Fury did win, but then completely dominated Chisora, forcing a corner retirement in the rematch at that infamous show at the XL Arena, which went on into the small hours and caused loads of people not to get home until, well, it was time to go to work the next day, pretty much. But Ayman, you were at the press conference last week. What did you make of, the impression you got from both fighters and also Fury's claims about being the king of rematches?
I don't really think it's a thing as much as these sort of statistics are probably more used in other sports like football. The ideas of you fought this opponent and you beat him the second time round. Can you really apply that to the next fight against Oleksandr Usyk? Sure, the statistics reach. It was a bit of fun to play with. It's a bit of conjecture to toss around to your panelists on a pre-fight show as you're waiting for Fury versus Usyk. Or Usyk versus Fury on the night there, but it doesn't. I don't really think it's much of a thing, to be honest with you. Just as much as you can say Fury's a rematch king, you can also throw out that, well, Usyk's undisputed. He's never been beat. So what do you do really with it? I don't take too much out of that. Although what I will say on that, from a Fury point of view, is that he's been able to, in those rematches, and most famously in the first fight with Deontay Wilder, when he was flat on his back and looking at the lights, he got up off the canvas and he turned a fight where he was boxing beautifully into one that he went forward and thought, F this, I'm going to go and get this guy. And that became his game plan for the second and third fight. And then he executed those so beautifully. And then with the first fight with Oleksandr Usyk, it was there was success for Tyson Fury in that fight, both pre that ninth round and then even after the ninth round, there were spots of success as well too. It wasn't a complete blowout there. It was a close fight for me, from the way I remember it anyways. And if you look at the scorecards as well too for those judges, you maybe think that there are a few tweaks that you need to be making the game, not wholesale changes to get the victory the second time round over Usyk. In terms of the form at the press conference, it was a little bit, it left a little bit to be desired, to be fair. I did think in the first instance, and whilst you're working, you don't get to see too much, and I was trying to get to some uploading during the time, so I actually missed seeing the press conference with my own eyes. I was watching it on my phone at the time. But I was sort of surprised by the idea of Oleksandr Usyk bringing a photo for Fury to sign, and it was the photo of the punch. And then after the fact, then realizing what it was for Usyk to then sell those off to charity. And having not known that, I would have thought maybe that might have been a get you moment to see
Wine games,
yeah, to see how Fury would have reacted. And Fury, a man of the people, just signed it and didn't think anything of it. It was cool to see Usyk in the form of Agent 47 Hitman. I'm a gamer myself. I'm not really a fan of the stealth games. I find them a little bit too boring, but he has had the whole get-ups before. He's dressed up as the Joker, and Fury's most famously dressed up as Batman. Maybe that was a mind game there in the past, but I can't quite suss what the Hitman was.
Wasn't
maybe
Huey the Joker as well?
No, Fury was the Joker. Oh, Huey. I can't remember if Huey was...
when he dived over the thing and tackled him at that press
Huey?
conference.
Yeah, it might have been,
Huey,
yeah. Yeah, maybe he's sending a message that the Hitman always gets in, does the job, and gets out. That's the MO of Agent 47. But Tyson as well too. Look, ever resilient. He turned up in a suit that was made up of his own middle fingers. So middle finger straight up to Oleksandr Usyk. And
not literally. It's not like a Lady Gaga situation.
Yeah. So yeah, there was nothing really to take too much. To be fair, people in the industry were sort of like whispering as to how Fury might approach his press conference. Would we get the same rambunctious Fury with all the mottos and cliches and all the sayings? And could he really do that off the back of how the first fight went, or maybe the ninth round went? Maybe not. He chose to not. He chose to just kind of get the press conference done and be done with it. But he was personable. He was affable, man of the people, as he usually was. Gave me at least a minute or so of his time, as well as the rest of the media too. So nothing really to be drawn as to motivations, as to conversations surrounding the fight. Can't really take too much about it, but looking forward nonetheless to, apart from, actually, I say that, apart from talk of the corner team, and Sugar Hill was there, Andy Lee was there, didn't see John Fury there. Now, I will measure that out on the other side and say, like, Tommy Fury wasn't there either, nor was Paris, and they're often there at the press conferences as well, too. But being that John was part of the corner, it was strange to see that he was absent. I think Andy Lee has recently said in an interview, I think I saw it with Boxing Scene, he said that there will be one voice in the corner, and that voice will be Sugar Hill's voice. So we'll see how that plays up on the night. But it was peculiar to see John was absent at that press conference.
It's because it's a press conference, not a fight, and we all know John Fury. He's a fighting man. So he'll be there on December 21st, I have no doubt. DB Cooper one says, well, Dave Allen said that AJ's mate is also his mate, who he's known since he was a kid. So it's got to be the truth. All right, DB Cooper one. Rod Brown says Wardley versus Wilder is a possibility. Stephen says, DB Cooper, we won't tolerate gossip here, pal. Leave that to the other channels. This is Seconds Out. Thanks, Stephen. You've gone from slagging off our head reporter to defending our honour, all in the space of, what, half an hour? That's the effect that SO Live has on people. Eddie Hills, referring to the tragedy that became the Fury, says, it's a terrible thing to have happened, but can't make it public and then say it's not an excuse. I think you can. I think if you want to share something that deeply personal and terrible, that's a decision you make. But I don't think you then have to claim it as an excuse. I think, if you want to share those feelings, we certainly wouldn't judge Fury for it. DB Coupon says, speaking of other channels, what happened to IFL? Why did they go AWOL for 2 weeks but still film content? What's the industry saying? Fill us in, chaps. I mean, the industry is talking about it, but I'm not going to go into detail about what may or may not have happened. They are still attending the fight week events and so on, and press conferences, and that content is finding a home, whether it's on YouTube or not. So if you've got any more questions about that, I suggest you go and speak to them. Stuart says, Fury fought off the back foot against Usyk last time and barely survived. Usyk will stop him sooner if Fury changes that. Thunder Road says, Daddy, did you see when Ayman got startled and nearly dropped the mic when Anthony Yard yelled lines in the camp during their interview? Ayman, do you want to defend that?
I can't, because it's the complete truth. So, and Vinny was there as well too. And I said to Vinny, did he get you afterwards? And I think Vinny said, yeah. But he was able to hold the
Dragging
camera.
Vinny under the bus with you. Brilliant. We don't get we get deep Seconds Out.
Vinny, yeah. So Yard is very good to talk to. I really find him an engaging character. I really find it. I listen to each word that Yard says, and he did that thing. He drew me in like Jake the Snake Roberts, and then he hit the lions in the camp, and I was like, wasn't expecting it. He's done that twice now. The first time he was like, "Don't be scared." And the second time we was just cool with it. But yeah, it's twice he's got me startled with the lions of the camp from out of nowhere. And yes, it definitely startled me a little bit.
He hit you with the verbal DDT. DB Cooper 1 says to Thunder Road, lions in the camp, that was funny. Yard really said that out of nowhere. Al Ayman shit himself. I think that's a bit unfair, DB Cooper 1. I'd like to see you stand up to the verbal DDT, as we've just christened it, from Anthony Yard, AY. IQ Boxing Academy, you haven't confirmed if it is Zav or not. It'd be good to know. I'm assuming it is. Question, how does Okolie get on at heavyweight? Very good question. I'm happy to field this one first. Lawrence Okolie, of course, former 2-weight, if you include Bridgerweight, world champion, is now linked up with Frank Warren, Queensbury Promotions, and he will be campaigning at heavyweight going forward. I may have the opportunity to speak to Dr. Lawrence on Zoom tomorrow, so I've been told from Queensbury, so I better not slag him off now. But yeah, I think he's got a good chance of doing well at heavyweight. He's obviously been cramming down to get to the weight at Cruiser and then Bridger previously. I think he'll fill out. He'll be a physically imposing specimen at heavyweight with no weight limit now. I think he's got an awkward style. He's talented and he can certainly punch. And that punch power may be even less compromised now. He hasn't got to make the weight. So I think he could be a difficult opponent. I think the problem they're going to have is attracting heavyweights, or decent heavyweights, name heavyweights, to fight Okolie, because A, it might not be the most pleasing fight on the eye. B, he's very dangerous. and see he hasn't got a huge commercial value yet. He might get that having beaten or picked off one of those guys, but until then, we don't know. So, yeah, it's going to be hard to find the right opponents for Okolie, but I think given the right route and the right management and promotion, I think he could do well. Aim, what do you think?
I'd like to reserve a little bit of judgment on this and not to sit on any fences here, but just I don't know what Lawrence Okolie looks like at heavyweight, really. I don't know what weight he'll end to like weigh in at or be in on the night. You get heavyweights and you get heavy weights, like your Zhangs and Okolies of the world, Joe Joyce as well too. The other thing as well too, that punch power translated well at cruiserweight, but what about at heavyweight where you've got punch power and then you've got other fighters who've got big punch power coming back at you as well, and whether Lawrence is able to get that shot off and was able to make the dents that it did at cruiserweight too. A little bit of the puzzle's kind of been solved with the way that Crispin Smith was able to get to Lawrence Okolie, and sure, he had a trainer in his corner that knows his fighter and him very well in the former Shane McGuigan, but I think a lot of people might take that blueprint going forward and apply it to the fight with Lawrence Okolie if he find himself in the opposite corner. Still, though, that style is very much one that's going to play against him, as it will do. But I'm not certain as to how Lawrence Okolie, a cruiserweight version of what we've seen so far, not him as in this frame, but the way he's fought so far, really does translate over to the heavyweight division. So I have to reserve judgment for the moment.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Ra Hokum has joined us, says afternoon, Ra, nice to see you. Stephen says, I'm surprised the mainstream haven't accused Tyson Fury of contributing to the Ukrainian war by signing those photos. Very clever, Stephen, but you won't find the mainstream here in the Seconds Out live chat. Lucy McNicholas says Dubois versus the problem child. Isn't that Adrian Broner? Greedy Belly says Eddie Hills. Oh, no, he's laughing at Eddie Hills, sorry, his comment. Ra Hokum says, get Dubois versus Italma if Moses blitzes Dempsey McKean. Give him the chance to break that Mike Tyson record and catapult to superstardom. Yeah, we did discuss this before you joined, Ryan. We're not sure if Frank Warren would want to make that fight, given they're both still under the age of 30 and he's got them both under contracts, but perhaps. IFF says Okolie should fight Jared Anderson. Stephen asks IQ Boxing Academy, does Okolie knock out Dillian White? I'm not sure if Zav will answer that or not. Big Chungus, finally. Big Chungus is here. Ayman may have shat his pants, but he has a more majestic beard than you'll ever have, Thunder Road. Is that me? Am I his majestic beard? Story for another day, perhaps. IQ Boxing Academy, I agree he will be a difficult opponent. CMP Russell CMP says, I do like it when you go live answering questions. Why is everyone still putting up with the gad? He's very creepy. Yeah, I like the way you buttered us up by saying we always answer questions and then asking us a question we're probably not going to answer. I've got no real issue with Gad, aka Gareth A. Davies. He's always been very nice to me. We've had him on the channel occasionally as well. Yeah, I'm not gonna slag him off. He might karate kick me as well. That's the other problem. Grim Reaper says could do Wardley versus Okolie or something. Yeah, I mean that'd be an interesting fight. Rod Brown says Okolie is 6'5" and long reach. He has the frame. DB Cooper 1 says my source is this Dave Allen's mate who's also AJ's mate. Says my source told me Coogan lost the IFL channel in a high stakes poker game in Dubai. Well, at least that's the rumor I've been spreading. I mean, how high were those stakes? IQ, I'm just kidding. IQ Boxing Academy, good performance from Catterall. A Sandor Martin fight makes sense. We will be talking about Jack Catterall's win over Regis Prograis in the last segment of today's show. Thunder Rose says, salute Ra Hokum and I Boxing Hub. Eddie Hill says, depends on which stance Dillian comes out with. Now, Eddie. And you've called him Dylan rather than Dillian as well. We don't like typos here on the SO live chat, especially if you're slagging someone off. But yeah, so that's Usyk, Fury, and a few strays for Lawrence Okolie there as well. But we've mentioned Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn at different times throughout this episode so far. They seem to be on the same page at the moment, which is a rarity of anyone who's followed UK boxing for the last 5 years or so. They might be on the same page with each other, but they're not necessarily on the same page with all their fellow promoters. In a week where we've seen Bob Arum throw some shade at Riyadh season, have to take some comeback for that from both Hearn and Warren. We've also seen Ben Shalom still seemingly at war with Frank. and Eddie Hearn getting into it with Oscar De La Hoya. Ayman, what's going on? Why can't they all just get along? I thought Riyadh season meant the end of all this.
I guess you've got to want to get along, or I guess you've got to want to make more money than you making before. I guess you maybe need to make more money than you made before. I guess these were, I mean, Frank and Eddie were two of those where I remember when that first, I've said it before on here and I say it again, that first 5 versus 5, which was pitched by Frank Warren, was put out during COVID times, and boxing fans were talking about it. I thought, this is a good idea, actually. So why don't we follow it through? And I remember going at Hearn one time and said, and Hearn had been interviewed by other channels. He said, yeah, you know what, actually, after this period of time, I thought about it, and to paraphrase Hearn, of course, here. And you know, I think we might have this meeting with Frank and hash a few things out for the good of boxing. And then COVID came and COVID went. We were all back out, got the chance to go to events again and speak to Eddie and things. And I said to him, you know, are you going to go and have this conversation with Frank? And it just never even materialized. It all just kind of fell to the wayside and was forgotten about. And then now there's money to be made and there's fights to be made. And Eddie said it as well too. Look, we're businessmen as well too. We like the coin. That's what we're here for. We're all here to make a few quid, and fighters are getting paid a bit more. Frank and Eddie seem to have realized that and have come together. Shalom's in the mix, and like Frank, I guess, when he came through, had to bust down a few doors and didn't have the red carpet rolled out for him. Ben Shalom's having the similar sort of treading the similar sort of path that Frank Warren did as well, and he's taking it a little bit differently than I guess Frank would. But I suppose when you got two powerhouses in the form of Frank and Eddie, and the followings that they have, there's a bit of a different edge to it than there was maybe those years ago when Frank was making his way through the game. But yeah, I mean, I think the question was asked by Lewis Hart to Frank. He didn't want to field the question during the Usyk versus Fury press conference. Eddie was a bit more of a comeback to it and kind of going at Bob. And Eddie and Bob have had the differences in the past, and I think Eddie's kind of sort of waiting for Bob to exit the picture at Top Rank anyways. But when
you say waiting for him to exit the picture,
exit the picture.
Let's confront the elephant in the room. No, what are you saying?
As in leave Top Rank, I guess, or retire.
Retire.
Enjoy his time. Sure.
Woo! It's all right, Bob. It's all right.
That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. So Eddie just kind of went back at him and just said, "Where the hell is Bob getting this information from? The Riyadh season events have been brilliant. They've been, and there'll be more of them to come. So we'll see if that is the position there. We'll see if those further Riyadh events happen in different territories. It'd be great if they do. We'll have to see if they do. But either way, the fighters are still getting paid and getting more money from it. But the fact of the matter is so far, not everyone's been able to come to the table. And that is still a big issue when it comes to boxing. You've got this Latinos night coming up now with Oscar De La Hoya. And you've got a boxer in the frame there as well, too. So there's a bit of cross paths there. Maybe more can be made from that initial kind of discussion and that fight week and those fights happening if more fights can materialize from this event. But bridges have got to be built if fight fans truly want to get big fights and promoters to work together. These bridges have got to be built, and sometimes they're a bit it's shaky ground that they're being built on. But you can't forget as well too, like Eddie and Oscar did that face off, and they both seemed to agree that they would kind of sit down and make these fights and be a bit more friendly with it, and you know, for the good of the sport, sit down and put their differences aside. But these differences keep popping up. They keep rearing their head. They keep rearing up every Thursday for some reason for Oscar, and they're entertaining, sure. Some of the older heads don't really like the back and forths, but the newer ones in the game do like it. But really and truly, these have got to be put to the side if we really want to see the big fights. And the promoter stuff, it does get in the way. This is something that actually I wanted to say, Danny. I'm glad I've got to this point. The promoter stuff does actually get in the way of a lot of. It takes a spotlight away from some of the fights, because on that Baturbia versus Bill fight week, there was a lot of back and forths about Eddie and Ben and Frank and Ben, but we were having this big undisputed like heavyweight fight. And I do think that was a fight that got overshadowed by some of the fights on the card, but it also then got overshadowed by the promoter back and forth as well too, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you some kind of quick fire questions about the promoter back and forth, or at least the individual battles in a minute, Ayman. But let's just go to the chat because we had a few more come in. IQ Boxing Academy says, "Hi, Stephen. Okolie will give a lot of problems, but Dillian Whyte is still dangerous." DB Cooper 1 says, "Got to shout out Seconds Out Live. Truly is the most engaging boxing channel." Jesus, DB Cooper 1. Two in one live chat. What is wrong with you? Ra Hokum says, "Read the Gad. There's ageism against men our age, Danny." So I want to point out before I go on with Ra's comment, I am nowhere near the same age as Gad. Like, maybe it's my skin on this particular camera. Maybe it's the cough. But hey, I've got 15, 20 years on Gad. We're expected to become invisible in the media. At the same time, women our age actually do become invisible. Well, there you go. Very important point, Ron. I didn't like the way you made it at first. CMP Russell CMP says, "Here's another. Be good to see you on Porky's Corner." Listen, I'd be glad to go on Porky's Corner. We can discuss how we didn't get accredited for one of the Riyadh season shows, and then we later did, and how that came about. Because I think Porky and his team have got some misinformation about that, and I'd be more than happy to go on there and clear that up. As long as he doesn't ask me about anything about radiators and taking T-shirts off, because I'm not into any of that nonsense. Nico Van Dam says, "Is there another 5 versus 5 next year?" I mean, they certainly said it would be the first of many, or they hoped it would when they announced it, but I don't think that's been confirmed. IQ Boxing Academy says Okolie versus Jared Anderson makes sense. Eddie Hill says Okolie versus Guido Vianello. That'd be an interesting one, actually. Rod Brown says Aram on Jared Anderson. They always take the damn money. DB Cooper 1 says, "I wouldn't feel sorry for the Gad. I like him, but he's got his own estate in the country." Is this another one from your mate of a mate? And Bachelor London Pad, he no doubt bought for 250 quid with his first journo job in 1970. Lucky kid. I mean, you do make a valid point there in that, was it Jeff Powell, as far as I know, still has a ranch in Texas that he bought in like the 70s or whatever. And it is true, the journalists that came through in the 70s and early 80s made a fucking mint. And yeah, it is infuriating, even for my generation, never mind Ayman's and obviously Vinny. Perry says, "Money talks and bullshit walks." CMP Russell says, "I have nothing against the Gad's age. Anyone can be creepy, and he's creepy." All right, we get it, CMP Russell. Eddie Hill says, "Oh, this has become Gad chat." Eddie Hill says, "Is Gad playing a character? Can't believe someone like him would hold a job at the Telegraph for so long." I wouldn't say the Gad you see off camera is exactly the same as the one you see on camera. I'd say it's like a wrestling character. You know, it's an exaggerated version of their natural self. Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock. I'm not in any other way comparing Gad to The Rock. Toby Bartlett says, "Salute Danny, Ayman, and the chat." Thank you, Toby. Still spell Ayman's name wrong. EP says Dubois will take an easy fight like Dillian or Chisora. Yeah, I'm not sure what the situation is with Dillian and whether he can fight on the Riyadh season shows or not, because obviously they're administered by the British Boxing Board of Control. Not entirely sure what the situation is with that and the UK license, or them allowing him to fight on a foreign license there. We'd need to know that, see if it's a realistic possibility. CMP Russell says AJ's waiting for Fury to lose for a second time against Usyk, so they're both on a level playing field. Then they'll both fight. Just to bring people back, if you haven't already, please do vote in our poll. We've asked who should be next for Daniel Dubois in February, if not Anthony Joshua. Please let us know what you think. If you go for the option of other, please do let us know in the chat who you're suggesting. Thunder Road says, "Josh Hart had a cough last week. Probably the reason why Danny specified lady partner earlier. It makes more sense now." Now, Thunder Road, I'm not in the slightest bit homophobic. And if I was that way inclined, I'm sure I could do a lot worse than Josh Hart. But unfortunately for him, I am straight and his cough has no connection to mine. Plus, he lives really far away and I'm quite lazy. Avalor, he's done me there. Avalaugh says Big Bang versus Okolie, Triple D versus Parker, and AJ versus Big Baby Miller. Avalaugh's put a whole card on there. Eddie Hills says, "At the same time, even on fight week, the buzz around Baterviev Bivol wasn't that high." I was going to mention that when Ayman made that point, is that maybe the promoters in that case felt they needed to inject a bit of spice that the fighters themselves weren't providing. I don't know. If Warren Shalom didn't have a spat, what pre-fight mainstream buzz would there be? I think that's a valid point. DB Cooper 1 says, "I'm inclined to believe Bob Arum his Riyadh season not being abroad anymore comments." Yeah, but you would, DB Cooper 1, because he didn't name his source. So it's a bit like you. It was your mate's mate's mate or whatever who told him. Turkey needs to take advice from the likes of Arum, Hearn, the likes of Aram, Hearn and Frank are the ultimate yes men, not good advisors. Toby Bartlett says promoter beef during Viterbia versus Bivol fight week was Ben and Frank more than Ben and Eddie, in my opinion. JumpTube asked if Catterall gets Teofimo Lopez. We'll be talking about Catterall in the next segment. Big Chungus says, thanks for clearing that up, Danny. I've cleared up so much here. I'm not sure exactly. Oh, the not homophobic, but also not gay bit. No problem, Big Chungus. Hope it doesn't shatter your dreams. J.E. Prodigal Son says, idiots. AJ is fighting Triple D dummy. Right, thanks for that. DB Coupon says, boxing journalism just ain't what it used to be. Please set me up in a high-stakes poker. What is it about you and high-stakes poker games? With Jeff Powell, Mr. Flexen. I fancy myself a Texas ranch. Ayman can be the cowboy. All right, I'm not sure where this is going. J.E. Prodigal Son says, AJ positioning himself for Fury, but Fury is already trying to weasel away. Lol. Toby Bartlett says, how does Ayman spell his name? Last time you called me out for leaving him out. Now I spelled his name wrong. Well, it's not victimization, Toby. Just spell his name right. Ayman, not En. Rod Brown, Okolie. We spelled Okolie wrong as well. That's Rod Brown, though, not Toby Bartlett, in fairness. Okolie Dubois, but they won't take the risk. Avalaf says, anyone else really not interested in Ben versus Eubank? Too many excuses for losing the fight, in my opinion. And DB Coupon says, I feel it's my fault people misspell Ayman's name. Spell it right there. Long-running joke, amen, old boy. Nothing serious. What is this nice version of DB Cooper again today? Right, so Ayman, on these promoter beefs. So first one, because I don't watch them, Oscar De La Hoya's clapback Thursdays. Is it always Eddie in the firing line?
I've only seen a few of them. I can't say I've seen all of them, but for the majority of the time, like Oscar just seems to be peddling like the matchroom curse and how Eddie's not a great matchmaker and always seems to get his fights beat. If you want to go to Eddie, you might get paid, but you might also get beat, and that's the push or end of your career, which Oscar's trying to put out there. So yeah, I mean Eddie does kind of get it a lot, and Eddie does give it back as well too. In the form whenever Oscar has a bit of an interesting video where he might be half naked and oiled up, Eddie does give it back and shares as well his concern for Oscar De La Hoya, as others in the past as well too. We've got an interview coming up soon with a former Golden Boy fighter as well too, shared a similar sort of thing as well. So Eddie's not alone.
What, of Oscar oiled up?
No, of his concern
okay.
as to Oscar's.
Because I haven't seen that on the channel.
But I mean, yeah, Oscar seems to have a thing to go for Eddie right now. And does this promoter beef like really kind of hype up a fight card specifically? I feel like when it comes to the conversation, it more kind of, if you want to say push up or pushes down the two parties, that it's either way, it's pushing those two into the spotlight as opposed to the fighters. But yeah, Oscar and Eddie isn't something they've sat down and they've spoke, and so they're still going at it over social media. And then when you have the fight week, and then you get them the two on the camera, it's all kind of friendly. And I'm not expecting them to come to blows. I would for sure bank one over the other if it ever did come.
Oh yeah.
But then it makes you think as well too. Is it all just for the cameras, and is it all just a bit of a right? You have a go at me, and I'll have a go at you, and all that sort of stuff. Because it was like that with Eddie and Ellaby, weren't it? And they've recently, or at least since Ellaby's exited the picture as well too himself, they've become a little bit more friendly now. So yeah, maybe it is just a little bit, and we're the ones that are getting played, and kayfabe is real just in the boxing world.
And just on this, before we move on to our final segment, Frank Warren said a couple of times now he wants Ben Shalom to issue a public apology after casting aspersions about Fabio Wardley's gloves from that show. He says, if not, they'll have to, well, he said to me, we'll have to deal with it another way. But he said previously, I think on TalkSport or somewhere else, that they will go to court to resolve it. Do you expect Ben Shalom to make that public apology?
Tough question, to be honest with you. Ben seems to think that his wording was that he, if I'm getting this correctly, and of course paraphrasing the situation as well too, that the wording was to suggest that we're not investigating or casting aspersions over the gloves, and it's all been taken out of context, and rather that, look, we've had this passed over to us. We want to push this towards them and then see if there's anything in it, as opposed to there's something in this and there's a big concern for here. And I think Frank and other parties involved are aggrieved that those aspersions have been made at all, and these shouldn't have been made public if you have those aspersions, which are even in the most vaguest of senses as well too, because it does take the conversation to a different way. And I did sympathize actually kind of wholeheartedly with Wardley. I saw his interview with Boxization, and he goes, I don't want to be associated with that. I don't even want to have anything surrounded to that by my name. And Wardley isn't someone who has the character or kind of the background of these sort of circumstances happening. I remember back to, and of course I wasn't around during the time of Billy Collins Jr. and Louis Resto, but I've seen the documentaries, I've seen the fights back, and I remember speaking to one of my friends, Steve Wellings, and he was telling me like once you know kind of what happened and what went on there, you look back at the fight and it's tough watch. It's because you know what's coming and you know what happened to Collins Jr. afterwards, and you can't help but think that the effects and what he went through in that fight led to how his life eventually ended. So for someone like Wardley to have anything surrounding something with the gloves or anything being off or whatever it is attached to him, it's a bad black mark for someone who's only been a real good character in the sport, speaks so well about the sport. So I completely understand and agree to that. But to answer your point as to whether there'll be an apology, I think Frank will probably have to push a little bit further if he wants to get an apology from Ben Shalom. And in recent weeks, actually, how we've seen where comments and remarks have been made, apologies have come pretty
Yeah.
swift and fast, haven't they? And this one hasn't. So I think an extra push might have to come if Frank really wants to get that apology.
Jim Corcoran says, coward bum Joshua ducking everyone as always. Don't sit on the fence, Jim. Tell us what you really think. DB Coop 1 says, I hope De La Hoya and Ben Shalom form a partnership against Hearn and Frank Warren. Avengers Civil War kind of vibe. As long as we don't have to see Ben Shalom with his top off oiled up, then yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that tag team match. Eddie Hill says, something tells me Shalom has better ties to the legal industry than Frank. Eddie, I hope that's not vague notion of anti-Semitism there, because I do have a big Jewish contingent, although saying that, I have no ties to the legal industry, unfortunately. It's never done me any good. Stephen says turkey, raw or cooked. That will remain legendary in my opinion. Flex and the Flexinator stood on business then. I'll make no further comment on that. But yeah, so the final segment of the show is the boxing that did actually take place on Saturday at the opening of the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester. Ayman was there, of course, representing Seconds Out. And in the main event, we saw Jack Catterall and Regis Prograis. The thing that I found the funniest about this, watching on the Zone and following the show on social media, was that Tony Bellew's unofficial scorecard came up about, 8 rounds into the fight and got a huge deluge of abuse. You know, Belly doesn't know what he's talking about. How can it be that way? He's talking rubbish, etc., etc. Which, I had some sympathy for at the time. And then it got to the end of the fight, and the scorecards were pretty much in line with Bellew's scorecard, which in itself was a bit of a surprise. Ayman, what did you make of the fight overall? And did you think the scorecards were a fair reflection of what unfolded?
I think the funniest thing about this fight is this headline right now. Vinny is going to have to get back to his spelling because he's missed off the J in Jack Be Nimble. Vinny, we'll get at you for that one. But yeah, look, in terms of the fight, with Catterall being his style, he's so unique in his style, and he's so great at what he does. His style can sort of threaten to make for a not so exciting fight, and you kind of felt it might go that way after 4, 5, 6 rounds. And in saying that as well too, there were a lot of kind of thoughts about Regis Prograis and where he stood in terms of his career so far, and some of those came from me because I had concerns as to this being not the peak form of Regis Prograis. Naturally, it wouldn't be, of course, because he's getting on in age and some of the fights he's been in as well too. So you wouldn't get that. But the concerns were from, and it was at a very high level against Devin Haney, where he felt the way his body reacted to and some of the punches he took and some of the statements he made after the fight and saying that, look, I've been hit by harder punches and I don't know how I got down or went down to the canvas against Devin Haney. But you just wonder what that meant for him and his resistance as well too, and whether Jack could kind of capitalize upon that. But what we saw in that first half of the fight was a good version of Regis Prograis, who I don't think I've ever seen Jack get caught so cleanly and so hard in a fight. And he showed a bit of a chin himself as well too. And then his nous to get out of the way of further shots from Prograis. It was a knockdown, although be it a bit of it's not a true knockdown, but the punch helped contribute to him going down along with a slip as well too. So that's the first time in Jack Catterall's career that he's been knocked down, but he got off the canvas. And after that after the halfway point, kind of really kind of put it on to Regis and turned the fight there. And Regis never looked like particularly like rock from the shots that he took, but he said himself after the fight that like going past the 12 rounds just might be a bit too much for me, and going past the 10th it's really taken a lot out of me. And then you can see kind of his knee wasn't, he was moving his knee a little bit differently. It seemed like he jarred it. The way he was moving was a little bit off, and what really kind of kept him in there was his pride, really, to kind of see through the fight and want to, like, at one point he kind of motioned towards the corner to bring Catterall on, and he was buying himself a bit of a veteran move, buying himself a time, stopping himself from using his knees and feet as much as he had to because he was hampered. But this was a good fight for Jack to get through whilst he waits for an opportunity higher up the chain, a world title opportunity. We believe to be the Para Hitchens winner being the route for him. But those scorecards, they were a lot closer, I thought, than the fight reflected it to. So the scorecards reflected it to be. But Jack was the rightful winner. So I don't think too much will be made for it. But I'm glad that it had those bits of excitement, and the crowd for the Co-op Live Arena as well too. This is the first boxing event there as well. Were reciprocated to the action as well, and it's a good crowd in there on Saturday night. So well done to Jack, and hopefully we get to see him in a world title opportunity again very soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fight, the second half. I thought the first half was pretty boring. I'm glad the knockdown, which was a fair knockdown, a punch landed, and even if he slipped, it doesn't matter. The glove touched down. I thought that sparked Catterall into life. He realised it was perhaps a close fight and he needed to do more, and he did. The second half of the fight was a lot more exciting as a result. I think you're probably right. Prograis probably has faded a bit. He's certainly not the same fighter he was, who blazed through the World Boxing Super Series and gave Josh Taylor an incredibly hard fight in the final. That kind of that explosivity seems to have gone a bit, although the skills are clearly still there. And he will now reflect on his future. I think didn't Sam Jones kind of semi-confirm Regis's retirement in the post-fight interview, but we'll wait and see what he says. But as for Jack, he needs to put on a full performance. You know, like they say about football teams, great in the first half or great in the second half, you need to put a full performance together. I think it's the same with Catterall. He can't afford to coast against this high level of opposition he's fighting. You know, it wasn't for a world title, but it was world title level. And if he's going to go up next against the likes of, I don't know, Teofimo Lopez has been mentioned, Liam Paro, Subriel Matias, there's a number of options out there for him. They, you know, both Sam Jones and Eddie Hearn have said it will be a world title fight next. He'll need to up his game. He won't be able to afford to coast against the likes of Lopez and Paro. A lot of people talking about the crowd in the chat. Ayman, how kind of full was it compared to the capacity?
Yeah, I mean, by no means was it a capacity filled out event at the Co-op Live Arena. Very much the black kind of, what do you call it? Is it tarpaulin you call it, that you put over the seats? A lot of the kind of rows were filled out with that, but I didn't expect it to be that sort of event there. I'm really not a good gauge, and I've been asked this by fellow media members as to like how many do you think are in this arena tonight, and I couldn't tell you what a 8,000 mass of people look like, or a 4,000 mass, or a 2,000 mass. I can tell you what an empty arena looks like because I've been in fight weeks or fight nights where fights have happened and there's been a smattering of people in a vast arena, and it definitely wasn't that. Whether those tickets were sold or comped or whatever, I couldn't tell you that either, to be honest with you. But there was a good crowd in there, and after Campbell Hatton as well too, for all his faults right now as a fighter who's trying to improve, obviously would have sold quite a few tickets, and we were getting conversations that, you know, other fighters in the card had sold a lot of tickets, but people seem to stay in there as well too. Obviously some people leave, but no big kind of obvious gaps in the arena as to what was available to sit in. So at least from my vantage point. So yeah, it was pretty full from what was advertised.
Stephen says, can I ask why Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis never bothered to go to 147, especially Josh Taylor? I think Taylor was talking about going to 47 for a Terence Crawford fight, which, I think we can all be glad that didn't happen. No offense to Josh, who's still an excellent fighter, but I wouldn't have given him much chance against Crawford up at 147. And I don't think Taylor or Prograis are particularly huge for the weight at 140 either. I mean, no one makes weight comfortably, do they? But I don't think they're particularly big for the weight that there's like an incentive in that sense to move up to 147. Plus, he's been dominated by Terence Crawford and Errol Spence for years when they were in their kind of prime at 140. So is that a division you'd really want to move up to if you don't have to? As Adi Oladipo says here, the outcome would have been both of them being fed to Crawford. Adam Millington asked for Moses versus Triple D. Comet V or Comet 5 says Zhang Gillet is the best fighter. He is king. MB says, I think Richardson Hitchens will beat Paro. Jack's style won't work against Hitchens. Yeah, that is an intriguing fight coming up. The unbeaten Richardson Hitchens. God, why is it hard to say Hitchens? Will beat is a good fight against Liam Paro coming up. I'll have to study both of them a bit more to kind of make a prediction on that. But I think either of them is a difficult fight for Jack Catterall, a tricky fight stylistically as well. And he'll need to improve again from the performance against Regis Prograis. Stephen says, Eddie Hearn has encouraged Campbell Hatton to retire, who's lost twice now at area level. Interesting, blunt take. Yeah, I didn't see him advising to retire. I saw a headline that says he wasn't progressing, which I think is probably a fair comment based on losing, relatively similarly to the same guy twice. But I felt a bit sorry for Campbell because it's his first fight with a new team. He's probably still being kind of schooled in their ways, how they, not just in terms of a style in the ring, but just how they prepare for fights, how the S&C works, how the video analysis works. Going straight in against someone you've just lost to maybe wasn't the right idea with a new I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, isn't it? I did expect Campbell to win the fight. But he clearly lost, and now it's back to the drawing board. But I hope he doesn't now change trainers again or go back to his comfort zone. I'd like to see him stick it out in Harlow, quite far from home for him, but like to see him stick it out there with Ben Davison, Barry Smith, and the rest of the team. Barry Smith, head trainer, of course, and get more used to their methods, get more used to the style in which they want him to fight. And then, maybe fight someone else, give Jimmy Joe Flint his flowers and let him go off and do what he needs to do, and then see what happens from there. But someone of Campbell's age, I don't think necessarily needs to retire. I think the expectations for him are inflated because of who his dad was and also because of the prominent positions he was placed in on shows in the past. Not so much the one just gone because it wasn't a massive show and he was third down the bill before the chief support got called off. Ra Hokum says, just goes to show the negativity towards Riyadh season events is exaggerated. Most fight nights are half empty with a dead atmosphere. There's only a handful of fights that draw a large crowd. Yeah, but it's a bit different, isn't it? Riyadh season is there to appeal to a big TV pay-per-view audience. It's not there to pack arenas, is it? You don't need the atmosphere necessarily for those because you're getting brilliant fights for the most part. I think for a show like this, Catterall Prograis a trade main event, to be fair. It's not even a level of trade main event like Bivol Beterbiev, which will attract some interest beyond the hardcore. So I think for that, you do need a bit of atmosphere to increase the attractiveness of the fight and the show as a whole. Eddie Hill says, Campbell getting too expensive for Eddie, especially if he keeps losing. DB Coupon says, Flint took another fight after the first Hatton fight and got beat. Flint ain't even the best at area level. Campbell needs to walk away. I mean, Flint didn't fight at area level in that fight in between, did he? I thought he fought someone up in Scotland, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Campbell needs to walk away just because he's not an area level fighter. He's still very young in the game. He didn't have a long amateur career. It's up to him. I don't think he's endangering his health by still boxing. So if he wants to do it and he's happy to do it for the money that they'll give him, then I don't see it as a major issue. Stephen says, oh man, I would pay any money to watch Campbell Hatton and Ben Davison watching tapes together. That would be comedy gold. I mean, I think it's Lee Wiley from that team who's in charge of the video analysis anyway. But yeah, I don't think there's any need for that, Stephen. James Francis says, Joshua is finished. No coming back. Joshua is brain damaged now. James, I didn't realise you were a doctor and you were able to diagnose from the comfort of your sofa. But we will pass that on to Joshua's team just in case they want to get him checked out. Eddie Hill says, Hatton being baffled when Ben shows him the heat map. That's not very nice either. Why is everyone down on Campbell Hatton? Ayman, have you got anything to kind of redress the balance and the journey of Campbell Hatton?
I was sort of laughing in the background because your lighting was going. It was making me laugh.
Oh, sorry.
What did you do? Just turn the
I'm not
camera
sure.
light.
It just the screen went off, but I've got it plugged in and charging, so I'm not sure why that happened.
Anyways, with Campbell Hatton, look, I think the stick with him is somewhat unwarranted. Like he can't help that he has that family name and he's the son of Ricky Hatton, who's a great in British boxing and boxing in general. But when you've taken that path that your father did, boxing fans are unforgiving and hardcore boxing fans are very much unforgiving as well too. And you've got to prove to them that you're capable and ready. And when you get those opportunities that other fighters would die for to be, and of course, it was circumstance that led him to being chief support on this night because of what happened with Reece Bellotti and Michael Gomez Jr. But having had the slots to fill on an AJ undercard in Tottenham as well, where a lot of people thought that he lost that fight too. People kind of start to get on your back and want to kind of point the finger at you and tell you that you're not good enough. For what it's worth, I think at the level that Campbell's been at and the style that he fights, he's very much game and he very much wants to go and he doesn't hide from what's in front of him, and I think that's commendable. And as well too, to you've got to when I having been in gyms a little bit more, training a little bit more, and understanding the levels of the sport a bit more, even at the area he's at, it's still a good level to be at. Like it's not like I don't think Campbell Hatton's kind of really been shouting at the rooftops that he's going to be world champion and then he's going to be two-way world champion and all this sort of stuff. I think he just wants to try his hand at the sport. But yeah, he one of the things was when he left Matthew Hatton, you kind of wondered what the propensity would be for him to learn more from a different gym, and Campbell only showed that he learned a little bit more really in from what he learned with Barry Smith and Ben and Lee, and applied that on the night it seemed. And that's understandable as well too, because it's your first fight in with that different type of style, so that takes time to bed in and gain and grow and learn and apply. So I do understand that, but on the other hand, it's fuel to the fire for boxing fans to say, well, you've done that, you've moved to another trainer, and you've still lost it. It's a you problem. That's what people will say to Campbell Hatton. I think it's fair to say for Eddie to say, and I don't think he said to for him to retire, but to just understand whether you want to do this, and you got to really throw yourself in here because it can be so unforgiving, and whether you want to continue or not is a personal decision. In the same sort of way with Conor Ben when he lost, when he had that
when
fight with Paynord, but a lot of boxing
he
fans
beat
thought,
Cedric Payno.
yeah, a lot of boxing fans thought, maybe even myself, we lost to Cedric Paynord. He kind of said that he had that time to reflect on it and improve and look at taking everything outside of the equation with what's happening with Ben right now and his fight right now. He did seem to improve in terms of his boxing technical skill. And that's what fighters like Ben, that's what fighters like Harlem Eubank, that's what fighters like Campbell Hatton, that's what fighters like Chavez Jr. will get. They get more time and they get more rope to improve because they have those names attached to them, because of what is possible on the other end if they get it right, because they already have a following or background or understanding with the public. You can turn them into assets, you can turn them into ticket sellers, you can turn them into commercial projects because of the name that they have, and that's why they'll get afforded more time, get afforded more opportunities. That's just part of the game completely. But what Eddie is saying is you've got to show it, because Eddie was saying, I don't really deal with this sort of level, maybe once in a while, but I'm big time. The one thing though that hardcore boxing fans can really push on, and I think it should be said here, is a lot of hardcore boxing fans have been saying out from the start that they saw Campbell Hatton, that he wasn't showing that he'd have the potential at the outset, and wasn't showing that he's improving. So maybe take this guy off of the big nights and
Yeah.
onto the smaller shows, away from the cameras, who doesn't get the stick. And Eddie sort of said the same sort of thing. Maybe now we take him away from those big nights and take him off away. And I think that's a misstep from that point of view to have given Campbell such a spotlight, because he would have benefited from a smaller spotlight to hone his craft and not a lot of press and not a lot of just away from that scene, because I think that's kind of that faster pace that maybe you have to go at when you get those opportunities isn't right for him right now. So he's got a lot of thinking to do.
And on that note, someone else who's got a lot of thinking to do is Frank Warren, promoter of Daniel Dubois, to decide who Dubois will fight in February in the second defence of his IBF heavyweight title. Like that segue. We've got the results of the poll. Thank you to everyone who voted. We've got an overwhelming winner in that it should be Joseph Parker, who gets 43% of the vote. Zhang, second with 23%. And the Campbell Okolie winner with 21%. The rest going to other. And we've seen a lot of your suggestions coming through on the chat. So thank you, everyone who voted. Hopefully, I don't see it, but hopefully we do get to watch Joseph Parker step in as the next challenger for Daniel Dubois. But it seems like it might be a bit risky style-wise for Dubois. But we'll see. I'm not ruling it out. But if Frank Warren's watching, that's who the people want. But thank you all for tuning in. Please do give us a thumbs up if you haven't already and a subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. We'll be back next Monday at 4 p.m. But in the meantime, if you're watching this on playback, please do leave some comments. We do respond to them on there and not only via the live chat. And as is customary, the final comments on the show go to my co-host, Mr. Ayman Khan.
Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in this week. Like DB Cooper says in the chat, hit the thumbs up on the way out, you greedy bastards. Good show today. It was a good show, but it couldn't have been a good show without my co-host Danny Flexen and Vinny Kiss in the background as well, too, managing the live. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We'll be here again next week, as Danny says. I'll be also out in the field, as Danny mentioned at the top of the show. Local show for me in Birmingham with Liam Davis versus Shabazz Masood. But any other breaking news and topics we'll be on top of at Seconds Out. But for now, that's the end for this one, and we'll see you guys next week.